Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Eco of Life. Let's start. There's a certain kind of strength that doesn't look strong at all. It's quiet, subtle. It hides behind small smiles and polite laughter. It's the strength you see in someone who says, "I'm fine." Even when their eyes are weary, their spirit feels heavy, and their heart seems held together by a thread. You've likely met someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. They're the ones who show up, who help others, who keep things moving while their own inner world feels quietly fragile. They don't want to be a burden, so they learn to wear a mask convincing enough to pass. A mask that says everything's all right, even when it isn't. Psychologically, this is both fascinating and heart-rending. People who pretend to be okay aren't liars in the usual sense. They're protectors, shielding themselves from vulnerability. It often starts early. Somewhere in childhood, they learned that showing emotion carried consequences. Maybe when they cried, no one came. Maybe when they reached for help, someone told them to toughen up. Maybe they were punished for expressing pain, or heard that others had it worse, so their feelings didn't matter. So they adapted. They learned that silence felt safer than truth, that composure was more acceptable than collapse, and that pretending was the only way to keep relationships, jobs, reputations, sometimes even their own sense of self, intact. It's strange, isn't it? We often praise people for being strong when they hide their pain, but we rarely stop to ask what that strength costs. Every time someone swallows their emotions, they're not just hiding sadness, they're suppressing truth. They're fragmenting themselves to fit into the world's narrow idea of what it means to be fine. The psychology behind this is often called emotional suppression, one of the most common coping mechanisms among adults. Studies suggest that people who habitually suppress emotions often do so because they associate vulnerability with weakness. Yet the paradox is that the more they suppress, the less connected they feel to others and even to themselves. It becomes a silent loop, fed by fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of what might happen if the mask slips even for a moment. So they keep smiling. They post cheerful photos, give bright answers, show up, crack jokes. They play the part so well that sometimes even they begin to believe it. But beneath the surface is a quiet exhaustion, not the kind sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from pretending to be someone you're not for too long. There's an internal dissonance that grows inside people who pretend to be okay. On the surface, they appear composed, calm, even graceful. Underneath, a storm never stops. You might recognize them in small ways. They deflect compliments. They change the subject when conversations get too real. They laugh off pain with phrases like, "I'm just tired," or "It's nothing really." Psychologists sometimes call this emotional masking, displaying socially acceptable emotions while hiding those that aren't. It's a defense mechanism often formed in environments where emotional expression wasn't safe or welcome.
It's okay
Over
to leave
time,
it messy sometimes.
masking becomes habitual. It becomes identity. And once that happens, they may not even realize they're pretending anymore. It just becomes who they are. But what's remarkable and often misunderstood is that these people aren't weak. They're survivors. Every time they smile through pain, they're using the only emotional tools they've ever known to navigate a world that doesn't always make space for raw honesty. They've learned to regulate the external world by controlling the internal one. If they can stay calm, maybe the world will stay calm too. If they can appear fine, maybe things won't fall apart. Yet suppression always comes at a cost. It might not show immediately, but over time, the body and mind begin to rebel. Emotional suppression has been linked to higher stress, lower immune function, and symptoms of anxiety or depression. Because the truth is, emotions don't disappear when ignored. They wait. For quiet moments, sleepless nights, the drive home after a long day. They wait until the noise dies down and the mask slips, even for a second. Then everything that's been buried can rush back. Many who pretend to be okay experience what some call emotional fatigue, a chronic tiredness that comes not from doing too much, but from feeling too little. It's what happens when your energy goes toward maintaining appearances, maintaining composure, maintaining distance from the parts of yourself that hurt too much to face. But here is something important and hopeful. Pretending to be okay isn't a life sentence. It's a defense mechanism, yes, but one that can be unlearned. And it starts with something terrifyingly simple: honesty. Not the kind that means confessing everything to everyone, but the quiet kind. The honesty that happens when you finally admit to yourself that you're tired, that something's missing, that you're not okay, and that's okay. This small act of truth is powerful because it interrupts the cycle. It stops emotional masking from defining who you are. The moment you allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding, something shifts. Your body relaxes. Your mind quiets. You begin to reconnect with the parts of yourself you buried to survive. There's a saying often attributed to psychology: what you resist persists. Denying pain doesn't erase it. It can push it deeper into the subconscious, where it shapes behavior without you realizing it. That's why people who pretend to be okay often struggle with deep connection. They crave intimacy but fear it because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means removing the mask. They might attract relationships where they play the caretaker, the one who listens, fixes, supports, but find it hard to let anyone do the same for them. Feels safer that way. As long as they're helping others, they don't have to face their own hidden wounds. And yet, deep down, they long to be seen, truly seen. Not for their composure or strength, but for their humanity. The soft, scared, imperfect parts they hide so carefully. It's ironic. The people who seem the strongest are often the ones who most need gentleness. The ones who never ask for help are often the ones who most need it. The ones pretending to be okay are often carrying the heaviest burdens, the kind no one can see. But the world rarely rewards vulnerability. We live in a culture that often celebrates hustle over healing, strength over softness, image over authenticity. We tell people to stay positive, to keep going, to never give up. But we rarely tell them it's okay to stop, to breathe, to admit they're tired. So people keep going until they can't. And when they finally break, others are shocked. I had no idea they were struggling. Of course not. The world often sees only what you show it. Here's a truth many don't realize. Pretending to be okay doesn't make you stronger. Can make you invisible. And invisibility is its own kind of quiet suffering. Because how can anyone help you if they don't know you need help? How can anyone understand you if they only ever meet your mask? There's a quiet bravery in being honest about not being okay. It doesn't mean collapsing into despair or announcing your pain to the world. It means being real enough with yourself to stop fighting your own emotions. Because pretending is exhausting, but being human is liberating. Being real means you no longer have to perform. You no longer have to put on armor every morning. You can simply exist in all your contradictions, imperfections, beauty, and pain. That's the real strength, not the strength to keep pretending, but the strength to stop. The transition isn't easy. When someone has spent years pretending, being real can feel dangerous, like walking out into the cold without a coat. But little by little, honesty becomes warmth. It becomes safety. It becomes home. Maybe that's the real journey. Not toward perfection or endless positivity, but toward peace. Peace that comes from knowing it's okay to not have it all together. That being honest doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Because when you finally stop pretending to be okay, you don't just find yourself again. You allow others to find you too. And that connection, that shared humanity, that's where healing begins. When someone pretends for too long, they begin to live between two realities. The one they show the world and the one they endure inside. At first, the separation feels manageable, like running two tabs in your mind, one for survival, one for truth. But over time, those versions drift apart. Eventually, you might not know which one is real. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional dissonance, the tension that arises when external behavior doesn't match internal experience. It's the mental equivalent of smiling while your heart breaks. The longer you live this way, the more numb you may become, not because you don't feel, but because feeling becomes too complicated. There's a strange comfort in pretending. It gives a sense of control. When life feels unpredictable, the mask becomes a shield. You can walk through chaos without revealing fear, talk about nothing while hiding everything. But the cost builds silently over time. Pretending might protect you in the moment, but it can disconnect you from your emotional compass. You stop trusting your own feelings. You second-guess your pain. You might start to think that if no one else sees it, maybe it isn't real. And that's where danger lies, because when emotions are ignored long enough, they don't vanish. They transform. They can show up as irritability, burnout, apathy, or even physical symptoms. The body doesn't know how to lie. It always tells the truth, even when words don't. Sometimes it appears as chronic exhaustion. Sometimes as headaches, muscle tension, or waves of sadness you can't explain. It's the body saying, please stop pretending. Many who carry this invisible weight start to feel detached from joy. Things that once brought happiness feel muted, like music playing underwater. It's not that they don't care. It's that their emotional bandwidth has been drained from holding up the mask. And yet, from the outside, they often appear functional, even successful. They're the dependable ones, the reliable ones, the ones who seem to have it together. But behind that calm exterior might be someone quietly collapsing in slow motion. One of the hardest truths is that people who pretend to be okay are often praised for it. They're admired for their strength, their consistency, their ability to keep going. But what looks like resilience may sometimes be suppression in disguise. Why do so many find it easier to pretend than to be honest? The answer often lies in social conditioning. From a young age, many are taught which emotions are acceptable and which aren't. We're often rewarded for being calm, polite, positive, and dismissed, shamed, or ignored when expressing sadness, anger, or fear. So we adapt. We learn that love and acceptance can come with conditions, and we start curating ourselves to meet them. By adulthood, many are fluent in emotional disguise. But here's what many don't realize. Every mask we wear distances us from connection, not only with others, but with ourselves. Connection requires truth, and truth requires risk. When we've been hurt before, that risk can feel too high. So we choose the illusion of safety instead. We smile through pain because it's predictable. We say, I'm fine, to avoid confrontation. We suppress rather than express because we've learned silence hurts less than rejection. But in doing so, we slowly erase ourselves. There's a saying, you can't heal what you hide. That's the paradox. The more we hide, the more lost we can become. Healing doesn't begin when you feel ready. It begins when you stop pretending, when you stop performing emotional stability just to make others comfortable. It starts when you give yourself permission to feel, even if no one else understands. Because here's the truth. Pretending may protect your image, but authenticity protects your soul. When you allow yourself to say, I'm not okay right now, something beautiful can happen. You open the door for compassion, from others and from yourself. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Psychologically, admitting your feelings is an act of integration. It reconnects the divided parts of identity, the performer and the person, the mask and the truth. That integration restores a sense of wholeness that pretending often steals. One of the most liberating realizations is that honesty and strength aren't opposites. They're different expressions of courage. The courage to smile through pain is one kind of strength. The courage to admit pain is another, and it's transformative. Sometimes healing doesn't start with grand gestures.
Addie.
It starts with small honesty, like answering, how are you?
It's okay to leave it messy.
I've been struggling a bit lately, but I'm trying. Like allowing yourself to cry without apologizing. Like taking a break not because you've earned it, but because you need it. Sometimes it's as simple as not faking a smile when you don't have one to give. There's something deeply healing about being real, even when that reality is messy. When you stop performing, you create space for life to actually reach you. Joy can feel real again, not staged. Sadness can move through you, not trap you. People can love you, not your mask. That's when connection rebuilds itself. And here's the irony. When you stop pretending to be okay, the right people often don't run away, they come closer. Because authenticity has gravity. It pulls in people who can meet you where you are, not where you pretend to be. Many fear that revealing pain will drive others away. In reality, vulnerability often builds trust. It says, I'm human too. In that shared humanity, walls can fall. Of course, not everyone will understand. Some are uncomfortable with emotions because they've been taught to suppress their own. That's okay. You're not responsible for their comfort. You're responsible for your truth. Healing is rarely loud. It's quiet, subtle. It happens in small moments when you finally allow yourself to breathe without performing. It's when you stop rushing to fill silence, when you stop needing to explain your sadness, when you stop trying to impress the world with how fine you are, because you realize something profound. The people who matter don't need your perfection. They need your presence. And presence comes from being real. Something interesting happens when people finally drop the mask. They start rediscovering parts of themselves they'd forgotten. Small things feel meaningful again. Morning light, laughter, art, quiet. Life regains color, not because everything is fixed, but because it's finally honest. And honesty, even when it hurts, is freeing. You begin to see that being okay isn't the goal. Being whole is being at peace with your own contradictions. That takes time and patience. But little by little, pretending fades, and in its place grows something stronger. Self-trust. You start trusting that your emotions won't destroy you, that your sadness won't swallow you whole, that your truth, no matter how heavy, deserves to exist. The more you trust yourself, the less you need to pretend. That's when life changes. You stop living for appearances and start living for alignment. You stop chasing external validation and start valuing internal peace. You stop performing happiness and start feeling it. Quietly, genuinely, deeply. Maybe that's what all of this leads to. Not perfection, not endless positivity, but peace. Peace that doesn't depend on pretending. Peace that allows room for sadness, joy, confusion, and clarity, all at once. Because being human was never about being fine all the time. It was about learning to hold the full spectrum of emotions without shame. The truth is, some of the most beautiful people you'll meet are those who have stopped pretending. They're the ones who have walked through darkness and no longer fear it. They've made peace with their imperfections. And that peace radiates in a way that's hard to describe but impossible to miss. They've stopped chasing the illusion of okay and started living in the reality of enough. So if you've been pretending to be okay, maybe this is your quiet reminder. You don't have to anymore. You don't have to keep carrying the world to prove you're strong. You don't have to smile just to make others comfortable. You don't have to hide the parts that feel too tender to show. You are allowed to be honest. You are allowed to be messy. You are allowed to be real because real is what heals. And the moment you start living as your whole self, not the filtered version, not the perfect image, you begin to attract a kind of peace that pretending could never give. Maybe the goal was never to be okay at all. Maybe the goal was to learn that even in your not okay moments, you are still worthy of love, of rest, of belonging. Because pretending might protect you from pain, but it can also protect you from joy. And life is too short to live behind a mask. You don't need to be okay to be whole. You just need to be honest. Because the moment you stop pretending, you don't just survive. You start to live. Thank you watching my video. Please subscribe my channel for more update.